Good evening, writers. I'm so sorry I'm not able to be there with you in person tonight. I have a family emergency that came up very unexpectedly today, and so I'm working through that right now. I would really appreciate your prayer, and I do expect to be back with you next week. In the meantime, it's my goal to make sure you're able to work through tonight's planned material as fluidly as possible, though. So, let's just start with a reflection time as we would if I was in class with you. Take a few minutes and think about who or what motivates you to keep going when you feel like your strength or your resolve is waning. This is a particularly relevant question for me right now, as I'm sure it is for many of you. And I think God has a sense of humor, honestly, because I wrote this question a couple weeks ago as I was preparing the presentation for tonight, having no idea that I would be in the middle of what I'm in the middle of tonight. So this is very relevant for me. So if you're with another student, share your ideas with one another. Sometimes that helps you process what you're thinking. It helps you get ideas and suggestions from other people that might be beneficial to you. So take time to think about that right now, please. Tonight's devotional thought is from Romans 15:4, which says, "For everything that was written in the past was written to teach us, so that through the endurance taught in the Scriptures and the encouragement they provide, we might have hope." It's no coincidence that we're starting class tonight with Scripture about endurance and hope on a day that we're really going to work on sentence structure and grammar and other foundational concepts. The Bible has a lot to say about endurance and about running this race marked out for us with perseverance, as it says in Hebrews 12. Sometimes that can become very tiring, and when we feel our resolve wane, a lot of times the details are the first to go, if you're anything like me. It's just hard to manage all the details. It's hard to pay attention to the details, to have the strength and endurance, to place details on our priority list. And there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn about writing in this class, in your program. But my encouragement to you, and I feel like the encouragement of this verse is for us, is to stick with it. We have hope. And in terms of writing, the positive change that your attention to detail makes in your writing is really worth the investment, which is one of the reasons why I asked you to think about what are some of the strategies that you have when you feel like giving up, when the details become too much. So that's my prayer for you, is that you would derive hope from this verse, that you would have the resolve and endurance that you need to have, especially where it concerns the details, and that you would really see the benefits of those efforts in your writing. So let's talk about this week, such as it is. We have four sections of class and activity to get through this week, and we will get through each of those things. With our grammar section, we'll continue our work on commas, just in a modified way today if I'm not there. We'll work through some grammar to correct your comma assignment. In Writer's Workshop, you'll work on sequencing paragraphs, comparing viewpoints, and learning a little bit about ensuring coherence in our writing. We'll work on our APA formatting and also allow time for editing of your research outline tonight. Let's look at our grammar tip for this week. So accept versus accept. Is anybody confused those words? Maybe some of you are nodding right now. Accept means to welcome or embrace, while accept is often used for comparison or to establish conditions. So although they're different parts of speech, they almost mean the opposite thing. So let's look at an example. The meerkats were willing to accept the lonely kitten as one of their own. As you can see from my cutesy little picture, there's a kitten in the line with the meerkats. Almost looks like one of them. They don't look like they're too hostile toward him. And in our next example, the kitten fits right in except for his little white paws. So the condition in which that cat does not belong to those meerkats is because he looks a little different. His white paws set him apart. Though maybe not so much in this picture. So if you are prone to confuse those two words, maybe this visual, maybe this example will help you keep those, the use of those two words straight. All right, let's actually talk about another sort of important grammar tip. As we continue to work on commas, one challenge for students is the relationship between commas and the words that and which. So let's look at that right now. That is used for what's called a restrictive clause or an essential clause. That means no commas are needed. An essential clause or restrictive clause is an adjectival clause, so it describes a noun, and it's essential to the meaning of the sentence. That's really the part you want to remember, essential to the meaning of the sentence. So it doesn't need to be set off by commas. So I'll give you an example, and there'll be some more on the next slide, but the car that I want is out of my price range. There are no commas in that sentence, and there are no commas necessary in that sentence because that begins a clause that I want is essential to the meaning of that sentence. So it really doesn't need commas to set it apart. Which, however, is what's called non-restrictive. So when that starts a clause, it needs commas. Which adds, when we have a clause that begins with which, it adds extra or non-essential info to the sentence. So the meaning of the sentence would not change drastically if that clause were left out. It sort of functions like parentheses. So again, on the screen there you see the phrase commas, which cut out the fat, go with which and never that. So it's kind of a little mnemonic device to help you remember when to use commas and when not to. But if you took out the phrase which cut out the fat, you could take that whole thing, sort of pinch it with your fingers and remove it, and you would have commas go with which and never that. Doesn't drastically change the meaning of the sentence, and you could take that out. You would still have a fully functional sentence there. You would retain the meaning, and therefore non-restrictive, commas are required. So it's almost like thinking about the difference between fiction and nonfiction. Fiction means not real. Nonfiction means real. It's kind of the same thing with restrictive and non-restrictive. So restrictive means no commas, and non-restrictive means commas. A little closer at each of these and some additional examples. So again, that is a restrictive clause, and the purpose of that, of using the word that in a clause, is to identify, to narrow, to specify, and it's essential to the meaning of the sentence, so it is not set off by commas. Let's look at a couple of examples. The house that we toured yesterday was tiny. There are no commas needed in that sentence. If we took out the phrase that we toured yesterday, you would have a very different sentence. The house was tiny. Therefore, no commas. We need to have that phrase in there, and so it cannot be removed, and therefore should not be set apart by commas. Another example, the class that I like best is professional writing. Again, if you took out the phrase that I like best, you would have the class as professional writing. It completely changes the meaning of the sentence if you were to take that clause out, and therefore it's essential. No commas. Looking at the word which is non-restrictive, and it gives more information about something that's already identified. So yeah, the information's helpful, but not essential to the meaning of the sentence. So the kitchen floor, which is filthy, needs to be mopped. Again, you could sort of pinch that clause, which is filthy, out of that sentence, and you would have the kitchen floor needs to be mopped. Knowing that it's filthy is helpful, perhaps, but not essential. Professional writing, which is my favorite class, meets today. Which is my favorite class? Again, you could pinch that out of the sentence. You would have professional writing meets today, which is important, but and the main meaning of the sentence, but we don't need to necessarily know that it's the writer's favorite. A little bit for you. So hopefully that clarifies a little bit for you about the use of restrictive and non-restrictive clauses, when to use commas with that and which, and you will probably want to practice that a little bit on your own. All right, moving on to our comma placement assignment. I did not ask you to do this assignment in advance, so if you would please spend about 20 minutes or so punctuating this week's comma activity. Hopefully you're getting better at this since we've done a couple of these. Feel free to use your St. Martin's Handbook to determine proper comma placement. Highlight your comma placements before moving on, and because I'm not there tonight, and really always, this is on the honor system, so please do, show academic integrity. Do this on your own without referencing the key. At the end of 20 minutes or so, when you're finished, go ahead and click on the next slide for the answer key. Please use different color pens than whatever you use to make your commas to circle any missed comma placements on your own paper. Feel free to correct up to 2 of the mistakes you make, add a reference from the section of your St. Martin's Handbook that applies and addresses the mistake, and upload your corrected version by Sunday. So either way, you need a version uploaded tonight, and then if you choose to correct for more points, please do upload. While tonight's comma placement activity was done during class, please do make sure you do next week's at home and bring your highlighted activity to class. Whether or not I give you class time is usually dependent upon what else I have planned and how much time that will take, and so next week's pretty full. So we definitely need to make sure those are done ahead of time. All right, let's move on to some sequencing. So last week we worked on sentence level sequencing, prior to that word level sequencing. This week we'll work up the writing scale to paragraph level sequencing, specifically focusing on a research example, so hopefully that'll help you kind of see the logical flow when you're presenting research-based material. How you arrange your paragraphs in your writing is the best way really to lead readers through a logical progression of your research so they understand your solution or your original evaluation. So what you want them to do is agree with the way you've presented your research so that when you present them with a solution, they go, oh yeah, I understand how he or she arrived at that conclusion, why they're offering that solution. And your research really is what accomplishes that. So, on your own, please work on reordering the paragraphs in this week's sequencing activity. You may do this work digitally, but I had intended for you to do this with hard copies cut into paragraph sections. So if that's easier for you, you can feel free to print, cut apart, reorder the paragraphs. And once you have what you believe is the correct order, just make a list of the letters and numbers in the correct order and upload it for this week's assignment. I will provide the answer key when I grade your assignment so that you're able to check your work. So either way, digitally or with paper, a paper cut apart is fine for you to work on this activity, but either way, you're producing a typed list of letters and numbers in order, and that's what you're uploading this week. During tonight's writer's workshop portion of our class, I would like to work with you on tips for writing more fluidly. One of the areas that can be challenging is called parallel structure. So parallel structure just means that items in a sentence are going the same direction and do so in the same way. So often this relates to things like verb tenses or pronouns. And you'll see how that works in some of the following examples. So not only is it correct to use parallel verb forms, it really helps your sentences flow smoothly and it eliminates confusion. So in this first pair of sentences, I'll demonstrate this for you. The duties of the job, number 1 says, the duties of the job include babysitting, house cleaning, and preparation of meals. The duties of the job include babysitting, house cleaning, and preparing meals. So if you see in number 2, all of the verbs, babysitting, house cleaning, and preparing meals, end in ing. That's what's called parallel structure. Having the same tense, having the same ending to all of your verbs creates a parallel sentence. And it just sounds and is a little bit more fluid and a little bit more smooth than the first one. In the second pair, consult a friend who is in your class. Consult a friend in your class or who is good at math. Consult a friend who is in your class or who is good at math. In number 4, you will see that who is creates parallel structure. Who is in your class, who is good at math. So that's where you're creating parallel structure with pronouns. All right, let's look at a few more examples together. Number 1, I had never before seen and would never again see such a sight. Number 2, I had never before and would never again see such a sight. Do you know which is correct? That's right, number 1. I had never before seen and would never again see such a sight. Those two verbs are actually different tenses, and they need to be different tenses because the phrase I had never before refers to the past and would never again refers to the future. So we need two different verb tenses. That's what creates parallel structure in that sentence. Number 2 is actually not grammatically correct. Let's look at this pair. We'll move to a new city in the Southwest or Mexico. We'll move to a city in the Southwest or in Mexico. Which is correct? That's right, number 2. We'll move to a city in the Southwest or in Mexico. So just that little word in creates parallelism in that sentence, and it's necessary. Adds just a little bit more clarity, a little bit more fluidity to the sentence. Another critical skill for producing thoughtful, coherent writing is considering point of view. So looking at points of view allows us to determine consensus in our research. It opens our minds to new ideas, and we can see how those ideas might be applied differently but effectively to the same situation. Also, when we truly consider point of view, more persuasive writing efforts, such as the solutions section of your policy paper, remember that one, are more credible because you have factored in more than a single narrow point of view to your solution. Often we think of point of view as representations of differing opinions on the same topic, but point of view differences can be much more subtle and maybe not necessarily at odds with one another. Sometimes seeing the same situation differently doesn't mean that you're seeing the same situation in a way that conflicts with someone else's viewpoint. So in this activity, you'll look at 2 points of view on the same topic, and we're really focusing on comparison tonight. Next week, we will be talking more about contrast in points of view. You're going to read each point of view separately, taking notes on the T-chart, which is either on the back or the next page, depending on how you printed this activity, when you discover primary similarities and differences, and really do focus on similarities for this activity. You can discuss this with a partner. You can add notes from each other's charts as you need to, and then answer the summary question on the back. Do take time to share your answer to that summary question, especially because, again, different points of view, you might arrive at a more complete summary if you share those points of view with one another. Originally, this task was designated for purely in-class work, so I don't have a submission link up, but I will include a submission link in the class for you to upload a copy of your notes. And this was also intended to be done with a partner, so do feel free to work with another student by phone or online to compare ideas and notes if you're not physically in class tonight. This will really only make the activity more valuable for you than trying to do it completely on your own. Another important consideration as you seek to produce coherent professional writing is paragraph development. Coherence really just means the degree to which your writing can be understood. We want our writing to be coherent as coherent as possible on all levels. So the broadest of levels, this starts with having an outline that presents a logical flow of main ideas. And on the paragraph level, this means thinking of our paragraph sort of like we would an essay, where the topic sentence is the mini thesis of the paragraph, and what follows is research and evidence presented piece by piece in tandem with your analysis and your evaluation. So here's some tips to help you ensure that your paragraphs are coherent. Paragraphs begin and end with important information. Basically, you want your paragraphs to begin and end with a bang. Your first sentence should be your topic sentence, should be your mini thesis, should give direction, should create interest, and your concluding thought in a paragraph is often your own best analysis of the ideas presented in the paragraph, as well as a transition to the next paragraph. A paragraph has to match itself, so it functions as one whole unit within a larger piece of writing. The words and sentences have to relate to each other. So if you're reading your paragraph out loud or silently and it seems disjointed, it probably is disjointed. It has to make sense as a whole. It's not just a list of individual sentences. Those individual sentences relate to one another. As well, the paragraph has to relate to paragraphs around it. So if you're using terminology in one paragraph that you have not used in another paragraph, or that you haven't defined yet, you have to define it. You have to create that continuity. And it has to relate to the paragraphs around it, which means it has to be part of a larger logical flow of ideas. All right, let's talk about how paragraphs are linked together. So here's some strategies to help link your paragraphs effectively. You have to have organization within your paragraph. So that means when you're presenting multiple paragraphs, you've structured them in a similar way. Your paragraph should sort of look and sound similar. They're from the same author, they're about the same topic, they're leading the same direction. There should be some similarity in your style and in your tone. Repetition. Repetition means you use consistent terminology and refer to ideas that have been presented elsewhere in your paper. That helps link your paragraphs together. Parallel structures we've already discussed, so verbs, pronouns, and so forth, making sure that each of your sentences is parallel. Transitional devices means you clearly indicate, usually at the end of a paragraph, where you have been and where you are headed, The benefit of that is that your paragraphs don't stand alone. So you need those transitional devices to ensure that your readers don't read them as a standalone piece of writing. All right, there's coherence also on the sentence level. So sentence level coherence is really the most detail-oriented type of coherence. When we look at sentences by themselves, we're looking for consistency in our verb tense. And remember, the research section of your policy paper really should be in past tense, while the problem and solutions section may be in present or future. We also want there to be transitions between sentences. So words like also, additionally, consequently, they establish relationships between sentences. We want there to be varied sentence structure. We need to vary our sentence structure. Sentence structure must be varied. We must vary our sentence structure. I just said the same thing two different ways. It's easy to fall into a rhythm or a pattern in our writing and really ignore the need for variety, but variety should be intentional. And lastly, short, simple sentences are fine. Sometimes the most important ideas are best communicated simply. That doesn't mean that all your sentences should be simple, but there really isn't anything wrong with mixing it up. Sometimes students fall into the trap of feeling like they need to write really complex, sophisticated sounding sentences all throughout their writing. That's not always true. Sometimes that short, simple sentence is the punctuation in a paragraph that you need to make a point. All right, moving on to the APA section of our class. So this week's APA activity should have been completed before class. If you did not complete this activity before class, please do not submit it. If you did complete the activity, please access the answer key that I will post in Module 3 tonight and correct your work. So you're going to upload your marked up corrected version for credit. Feel free to talk to other students about your edits as you make them, help clarify any questions, or you can send me your questions when you submit the assignment and I'd be happy to give you feedback. This week's APA moment activity is working on formatting paragraphs and the content of paragraphs, so you can use your APA guide, your APA cheat sheet for this activity. You only need to do task 1 on the week 3 APA sample file. You can go ahead and skip this slide because the answer key will be online for this activity. It's too long for me to post in a slide. The last portion of our class time tonight is dedicated to work on your policy paper. If you are in class physically tonight, and I am not, please follow the directions on this slide for tasks 1 and 2. As you work in groups, please use the checklist on the slide under task 1 to question, discuss, edit each other's research outlines. If you're not in class, not physically in class, please make a point of connecting with at least 2 other students and exchange outlines. Use the same checklist that's on the slide here to edit and provide feedback for each other's outlines. And really, I mean, this is all about logic. Are you organized? Is there a logical flow? Is each of your areas, your ideas, your headings, supported by research, and supported not just by research, but by current research, by authoritative research, by relevant research. So you're sort of looking for all of that. And I guess, what I want to say about this is if you do the hard work now and you really come up with a solid research outline, it will make the research section of your paper so much easier to write, because you're not going to go back and question and second guess the order and the way ideas connect. That's already done for you in your research outline. So this is really a critical piece of the writing process. After your group editing session, please revise your research outline. So if you have another instructor there with you tonight, and you might, please do ask him or her for help. If you do not, and you're editing without an instructor present, I'm more than happy to give you feedback on your research outline. Originally, I didn't ask that you submit an edited version of this, but because I will not be in class tonight, I would like you to upload your edited outline, and I will give you feedback on that. So I'll make sure I post a link for you to include that edited version of your research outline tonight. All right, looking ahead, the rest of this week and early next week is research, research, research. So editing your research outline, finishing your research, making sure you have at least 4 scholarly sources for your research section. And now some of you had source information in your problem statement. Some of you will have source information in your solutions statement. I'm sorry, your solutions section. That's fine, but 4 scholarly sources at least are required for the research section of your paper. And then you're going to draft the research section of your paper this week. It needs to be uploaded before class next week because the primary goal in our editing time will be to look at the research section of your paper. So please do upload it in advance. Again, I'm so sorry to miss you tonight. I will be in touch this week with feedback. I trust that you got some value out of tonight's lecture and activities, and God bless your week.